Hi, welcome to the Nursing Dose with your host, Farah, aka Dr. Laurent, the nurse career coach. Today, I have Sonya Frazier. Such an exciting guest. Such an honor to have you on. We met in DC at the premiere of Everybody's Work, Healing What Hurts Us All, and she was in this powerful documentary. And today, we're going to be talking about diversifying nursing strategies to consider. So, thank you so much for coming on. If you want to say hello and introduce yourself.
Yes. Halito, Sohishjaful, Sonya Frazier, Chokasha Mija Chatasia. Hello, my name is Sonya Frazier and I am Choctaw and Chickasaw. And Farah, thank you so much for having me on today. I'm so honored to be here with you.
Thank you so much. And she also is the founder of the Oklahoma Indigenous Nursing Association, president. So, can you kind of talk to me a little bit about that and how that came about?
Yes, this started whenever I was still working at a tribal facility. And at that time, it was right before COVID happened.
Mm-hmm.
And several of us, Indigenous nurses, we were talking about, we could sense something was coming. And we wanted to figure out a way to how to help to advocate for our Native nurses and our patients. And several nurses just kept saying, we need an organization. We need an organization. And we kept Googling, looking, just for any type of Indigenous Nurses Association. And with Oklahoma having 39 tribes, we were just curious, like, what doesn't Oklahoma have one? We should already have one. We should be a leader for it. Mm-hmm. And then finally, everyone just kept saying, Sonya, just do it. Just do it. So that's what I did. I looked for all of the nursing organizations that I could, sent them emails to see, how can we get this organization started? And the Oklahoma Nurses Association is the one that replied to us and said, hey, we're right here. We can help you. And that's when I got in contact with Jane Nelson. She's the CEO of the OINA. And she's the one that helped us get this platform built for us. And it's been awesome.
Awesome. And how long has it been? How many years and how has it grown?
We started in 2021, again, right during COVID. And it's grown. I believe we have 154 members now. But we're an all-inclusive organization, just not for Native nurses. Mm-hmm. We also need our allies to walk along with us as well, because we're very fortunate because now nurses are wanting to learn about all the different cultures and all the histories, because learning those histories is just so important, especially with our history here in Oklahoma, because you're going to be an Indigenous community no matter where you're working or where you go in Oklahoma, because it's all Native land. And it's just important to know that history. And I just feel very blessed right now because we do have a lot of allies that are supporting our organization and that are members of our organization as well. And we just say, come on, because yes, we welcome everybody.
That's awesome. Yeah. So for those of you listening, definitely look into it and see how you can join this organization. And again, if you happen to be watching, let us know where you're watching from, what city, what country. Put any comments or questions that you may have. And we're going to be talking about something very important in nursing, and something that's really also part of my agenda is to really increase diversity in our nursing workforce. And not just in nursing, but even just in healthcare in general, because we know that, right, the research shows that when we have a diverse workforce in healthcare, we have better patient outcomes. And, I'm getting like chills right now thinking about the movie Everybody's Work, Healing What Hurts Us All, the documentary, and you were a part of that film. Such a powerful film, and that's where I got to meet you in DC, and to see everybody in that room just supporting this film, even just watching it, like I was literally tearing up because there's so many different experiences, not only as nurses that we've experienced, but even thinking about certain patient stories or situations that have happened where we've had to advocate. So, you know, such a powerful film. If you want to kind of talk about how you were approached or and you know what it meant to you to be part of this film and kind of talk a little about that.
Sure, sure. I'd love to share that story because everything happens for a reason. I
Mm-hmm.
truly believe everything happens for a reason. And whenever we were giving a presentation at the ONA convention, we were looking for all of it. We were trying to find any Native American, Indigenous research, any information that we could share. And we came across a video, and it was about Whitney Fear, and she is a Lakota psychiatric nurse. And it was about her clinic, how she got it started.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, you know, as nurses, we just kind of go down a rabbit hole whenever we're trying to figure out something because we're going to keep digging until we find it.
Right.
And that's what I did. And I found the company that produced her video, her little documentary.
Mm-hmm.
And I just reached out to them, said, hey, you know, we would just love to. My first thing was I wanted to meet Whitney Fear because we don't see a lot of Native nurses representation, just like you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just exciting and it's inspiring to see. So we got excited to see her featured in this documentary. So that's
Right.
how we reached out to Shift Films and said, hey, we're interested in meeting her. And would you consider doing a documentary? Or if you're interested, you know, we would be willing to participate. And then they did reach out to us and they wanted to hear our story. And it was myself and my sister, Taloa, who's also featured in the film as well. And we did an interview with Shift Films and with Chad, the producer. And he just listened to our stories. We talked about the American Indian boarding schools and, you know, Oklahoma, they had the highest number of boarding schools here. And so all of that still affects all of our communities today. All the health disparities that we see, the social determinants of health, you know, all those words that we hear all the time in the healthcare systems. And, you know, as Indigenous nurses, we should be at the forefront of helping to heal from all of those. And that's why it's important to know the history. I'll always keep going back to that. We need to know our history. We need to know all of our histories, all of our cultures, all of our heritage, and just be accepting and feel like we belong because we all do belong here. And so what we did was we shared our family story, my mother's story. Both my parents are boarding school survivors, and it has a lot to do with who I am as a Native nurse, because I had to do a lot of spiritual healing myself. And I had to go back through my parents' history, you know, why they were the way they were. Then I went back to my grandparents, and it all just led back to boarding schools. And that's just one part of our history as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much more that we could discuss, but that was primarily the area that we focused on was boarding school. And I guess one of the most touching scenes that I've been told when people watch the documentary is the scene between me and my mother.
Yeah.
Because I do the water ceremony for her, where I just do a simple thing of washing her feet.
Yeah.
And it was a Creek nurse. She was our mentor. She was mine and Taloa's mentor. And she was the one that always told us to, you know, keep our patients' feet clean so that they still are connected to the earth, still connected to Mother Earth. And it's just a simple thing. It's just, I feel like those simple things that we do as nurses, we don't do those anymore.
Right.
And we really need to bring those things back so we can bring that connection back to our patients too.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you, you know, being in that room watching the film and kind of watching also the other nurses' experiences and stories, even down to the nursing students who also kind of shared some of their experiences with you know, advocacy and racism in nursing and that type of stuff. You know, kind of how did you feel when you started watching some of the other experiences that other nurses have kind of dealt with over the years?
I resonated with all of them because there's a similarity between our stories. because I also share about the health disparities with how Indigenous communities, we don't trust the educational system, we don't trust the healthcare system, we don't trust the social services systems. And that's all due to racism, because we were seen as not humans by colonizers when they arrived here. So that was the excuse they got to use for doing all the things that they did to us. And it was all the way to genocide. They wanted to eliminate us so that they could get all the resources here. And, you know, and we're still here. We're still here, but we're always seen as in the past. But, you know, we still exist. And that's why we have to really step up. And that was something I mentioned actually this year at the ONA convention, is that we need to start stepping out of our comfort zones and taking our places at the table. Because if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so we need to take that space.
Yeah. And I think it was such a powerful film, and even just space that day was so memorable because, like you said, there is so many people with shared experiences, and we could kind of resonate with different stories. And I think this is why it's so powerful. Not only the film, and everybody, you should definitely check it out if you want to see a viewing of it. I'll share the information later down in the links and everything. But this is the power of storytelling, right?
Yes.
I talk a lot about like even personal branding and different things like that. And I was just watching somebody that I follow quite a bit. His name's Chris Doe. He's a creative and personal branding person, but he was talking about storytelling this morning. I was actually listening to it and how powerful it is, because even in education, right? As we're young, you know, he was talking about fairy tales or stories, like that sticks with us, right? When we tell our stories to children, they remember that generation after generation. So when you talk about it's important to know our history, important to know kind of what has gone on in the past. I think it's a powerful way to share stories through storytelling. And I think also when we talk about allyship, right? It's very important for other people to acknowledge, right, the shared experience, because sometimes I feel like we're denied. Sometimes as nurses or patients, we're like, no, that didn't really happen, right? Like it's just your perception. But right, like if you want to kind of talk about that piece a little bit.
Oh, yes. I totally get what you're saying, because we have been told a lot, like, why can't you just get over all of that? That all happened in the past. You know, that didn't happen now. I'm not responsible for what happened in the past. But all of that just kind of trickles down. And even with my mother's story, you know, I just think about a lot of the times that, you know, I could not have been here because she could have been forcibly sterilized, because that was something that happened in our communities as well. My brother and I, we could have been put in foster care. You know, there's all these other events that could have happened, and that's in my lifetime. And I'm not even 50 yet. I'm not even 50 yet.
Yeah.
And it was just a few years ago that this was all happening. But yes, I would say don't discount people's stories. Just be respectful and listen, and just say, I'm sorry that happened to you. But don't ever discount somebody else's story, because that's dehumanizing as well.
So, you know, thank you for sharing all that. And today, you know, if you guys are watching, let us know in the comments any questions, comments you may have. If this is resonating with you, put a 1. But we want to kind of talk about some strategies to diversify nursing, because, you know, a lot of people will say, okay, right, so we have conversations and that, but like, how can we truly make an impact and start changing things? So, you know, one big way for me that I try to do through this podcast and other social media content that I share, number one is I always want to uplift our profession. Yes, it's not perfect, right? No profession is perfect. No industry is perfect. But I love nursing, and I think we have so many options in the nursing profession, and sometimes I think it's viewed sometimes in a negative way in the media. So I think one way is to uplift our profession and talk about it positively so that we can attract more diverse nurses into the profession. So I think that definitely is one way. And I know we talked a little bit earlier about 5 other strategies. So, if you want to talk about one, the first one was mentorship. If you want to talk about.
Yes, I think that's so important because, as I was sharing the story about the Creek nurse, she's been a nurse for over, I think, 40 years now. And, if I always think about what if she wasn't there? What if she wasn't the one that was my mentor? But she was, and I'm very thankful for her. But we need more like her as well. In our communities. I mean, just in all healthcare settings, because whenever you have someone that looks like you, that understands you, it's just going to be a better outcome for you. You're going to have a better outcome.
Yeah.
And the mentorship is very important. I believe that is so powerful in itself.
Yeah. And recently I was speaking to Dr. Ketchy, and she shared an experience where she was in a leadership course. And for some reason, she reached out to several leaders, but like nobody kind of wanted to take her on as a mentee. Right. So for all of those nurses out there, whether you're a nurse leader or not a nurse leader, as in the title, right? You don't necessarily have to have this big title to be a mentor, right? I talk to nursing students all the time. As nursing students, you could be peer mentors, right, to each other. So this mentorship idea doesn't have to be like a hierarchy. You could do peer mentorship, right? It could be formal or informal. And I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. Sometimes you may think that it's really time consuming to be a mentor, but sometimes it's not. It could literally just be a phone call, just touching base with someone, like another nurse, can really be helpful in a time where they're really needing guidance, or there's like a toxic workplace issue or something, to really help guide them, right?
Yeah, just being supportive.
Yep.
Really, I mean, just be supportive of any nurse that's needing any kind of help. That's a big help in itself, because it seems like there's a lot of toxic environments that are happening right now.
Right.
We just got to help each other get through it.
Yeah. And, when I used to teach preceptor classes and just any orientations, I used to say one of the biggest issues in nursing we have globally really is nursing retention, right? So when we have these newer nurses, especially, I'm a big advocate for novice nurses. When they come into our profession, we really need to be delicate, like you said, and be really supportive of them, because it's a very critical time. Like,
Yes.
1 in 5 nurses that start sometimes will leave the profession because it's too stressful, or various reasons. So we don't want people to leave the profession, or even nurses that are burnt out. There's other areas that you can go to. So don't feel like you have to leave the profession. There's so many other things that you can do.
Nursing profession is diverse itself. I mean, you can just go from one area to the other. And if you feel like you learn everything, which is what happens to me sometimes, I feel like I've learned everything I could in this department. It's time to move on to learn something else.
Yeah, and that's so much fun, right? It's like
it is.
So, again, we're sharing strategies on how we can diversify nursing as a workforce. So number 1 was mentorship, and number 2 is sponsorship. Something that I actually didn't know about when I first started in nursing. But it can really be a powerful thing for your professional growth in nursing. So if you wanted to talk a little bit about sponsorship.
Yeah, the sponsorship, for me, I was really lucky because I received an Indian Health Service scholarship while I was in nursing school, and that provided me a stipend and paid for my courses as well. So I was fortunate in that part, but not everybody's qualified to get a scholarship in that way. So Luckily, right now, like our organization, the OINA, we have partnered with a local college here that received a scholarship to help promote Indigenous nurses to go into the health profession of nursing.
Mm-hmm.
And we're really excited about that because we're going to bring in some ideas of culturally, using culture to help support them as well. Because even your community can be your support too.
Right.
But we're looking at how to sponsor other nurses, even in other programs, maybe like a CNA program, LPN programs.
Mm-hmm.
Because all of that is just so important as well, because all of us, we all need help whenever we're going to nursing school.
Yeah, those are such great points. And then just to add to that too, sometimes you'll have people also sponsoring you in another way where you may not even know that they're speaking your name kind of in rooms to say, hey, this person is great. They're doing
Mm-hmm.
this and this. Why don't you promote them or whatever? Because we talked about that allyship before and how we just really need to pull each other up in nursing as well. So yes, those are all great points. And then number 3, we talked about kind of outreach for diversifying nursing. So if you wanted to talk a little about that.
That's where I like to promote know your community, know the community you're serving so that you can meet those needs as well. And that's the amazing part of being a nurse, because we can infiltrate anywhere that we want to.
Yeah.
Being on school boards, being on, any kind of committees within your communities. It's so important to have nurses on those boards as well, on those committees, because we just have a different way of thinking. I think we're more holistic, in the way we do things. And so it's just important for us to be represented in those types of organizations as well.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Know your communities.
Yeah, and another big thing I remember, even when I was a little bit early on in academia, we talked a lot about kind of creating a pipeline for nursing, right? Even reaching out to, like, say, high schools, because sometimes they might not be aware of the different health professions and they might not truly understand what a nurse does, what the scope of a nurse, what the opportunities are, or even how to apply for scholarships, how to get into it. So I think it's important for nurses to kind of give back, like you're saying, whether you're in academia or not, maybe spending some time at a school just kind of teaching about nursing, because I truly think that it's also our duty as nurses to educate the public to really understand what nurses do. You talked about how we're more holistic and we have a wide range. We can really be working anywhere. Like, we're a nurse, we're in not just the traditional settings like hospitals, but we're, there's nurses in government, health policy, schools, communities. And it's just fascinating, all the different roles. So definitely reaching out to the younger, high schoolers to say, hey, listen, nursing can afford you this, right? Because I've heard a lot of stories. I don't know if you've heard similar, but I've heard a lot of stories where counselors, nothing against counselors, but just in general, sometimes they kind of tell certain students that, oh, no, you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't go here. You're not meant for this. I'm like, who are you to tell people that you can't do something?
Right.
For me, my own story, they told me that. My clinical instructor was like, you'll never be an emergency nurse. You should go to med surg. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I'm going to the ER.
And that's my personality too. If somebody tells me I can't do anything, watch me.
Yeah, exactly. In my head. That's what I said, watch me, lady. And I got hired, right? And this is why I think I do what I do now as a nurse career coach, even though I help all nurses, but I have a special place in my heart for these novice nurses, because I want to make sure they get into these areas that they're truly passionate about.
Yes.
Because the last thing we need is like these excited nurses like, yeah, I want to go to NICU. And then somebody tells them, no, you can't do it, right? And also, like, when we talk about diversity in nursing, that's another thing, right? Diversity in specific areas, because even in critical care, it's known to be that there's not a lot of diverse nurses in ICUs and things like that.
Right.
So we need to kind of get them to these areas through mentorship, sponsorship, all these things, and leadership, right? Is
Yes.
another big one. Yeah.
And I don't know if you've ever heard of the Black Nurses Association.
Yeah.
They have
Yeah.
what they do, mini camps, mini nursing camps. And that is something that I would love to get started here in Oklahoma. So that's on my to-do list with everything else.
I think it's Aaron King, right? That does, I don't know if it's in the Sacramento area.
Yes, he does. I can't remember the name of his.
Yeah.
That
I
he
think it's
has.
like City Capital something.
Something.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
So yes, targeting our high school students and junior high school students. Yes, that's where we need to be too, as well as nurses.
Yeah, which brings us to the fourth one, which is joining professional organizations, or how organizations can help also diversify, by maybe adding scholarships and things like that, right? To make it
Right.
easier, applying for grants or things for nursing students to be able to get these scholarships.
Right.
And discounted prices for nursing students to start getting into these professional organizations so that they can advance, and feel like they belong in our profession and stay. Because we know that it's not always easy, in certain areas.
Right. And then if your association doesn't exist, create it. Create it.
Yes, like you did. I love it. I love it. Yeah, it's all about innovation and being not being problem focused, but solution focused, right?
Right. Right.
Amazing. And then the fifth strategy is personal development and professional development, right? So if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yes. If there's anything that you're interested in doing, do it. Go for it. Don't be afraid. Don't talk yourself out of it, because I think we do that a lot to ourselves too, as we talk ourselves out of it, out of learning something new, just developing yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. Just have that courage to do it.
Right. And the other thing I want to bring up, and I don't want to offend anybody or anything, but the other thing about professional development, being an educator and a past director of education myself, there's been things like, for example, some states mandate certain education, for example, implicit bias for like women's health or obstetrics and things like that, right? Because we know it's like Black and brown women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die due to pregnancy-related complications, right? So it's like, yeah, we're still talking about that, but like, what are we doing, right?
Right.
And it's crazy, but I think from a health policy standpoint and nurses, we need to advocate more for these things to be like mandated, mandated education.
Yes.
Physicians or nurses to have things like implicit bias and other education that kind of helps them understand, these issues. And also, just because we learn about certain things in nursing school, because a lot of times we talk about cultural competence and things like that. When I taught, I used to tell them, listen, it's good to be aware, right, of different cultures, but you can't just assume that every person and every culture is the same or does a certain thing, right? So if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Well, I'm going to use the example of like our tribes, okay, because we can be more than one tribe. So just because they say this on their tribe, that's who they associate with. You still need to know how they were raised, because they could have been raised completely in a different area. So it's just it's just really good nursing to have that understanding as well. The best advice we always give is just ask the patient.
Yeah.
Talk to the patient. Don't be afraid to ask, and just say, I need to ask you a couple of questions. Are you comfortable with me asking this? Or, it's just simple.
Right.
Just making that connection with your patients.
Yeah. So please never assume anything, Sometimes they'll say, well, maybe this person doesn't want to get blood. I'm like, well, how do you know? Did you ask? Or like,
Right.
it's our job to, educate so people can make informed decisions
Yes.
and really ask about preferences, regardless of what you know or don't know. And it's okay if you don't know, right? It's
Right.
okay.
Right. Because we don't all know everything. We
Yeah.
don't. And yeah, just like you said,
Mhm.
that's okay.
Yeah. Because I think people are afraid sometimes to have conversations because they don't know how to approach it.
Mhm.
But I think just this is where you get your communication skills kind of going, and active listening
Right.
and all that. So where can people find you if they want to connect with you, if they want to maybe join the organization, if they have any questions? Where can they
Okay.
connect with you?
Well, you can become a member of the Oklahoma Nurses Association because we are a chapter of them, and that's how you find us, the Oklahoma Indigenous Nurses Association. We have a monthly Zoom meeting, which our next one will be October 2nd at noon. You can go to the website and find it there and join us at that time. We usually have guest speakers, or we're always sharing events that are coming up in Oklahoma. Just learning and sharing is what we do, and especially healing, because a lot of us Indigenous nurses, some of us don't even know our own history either. So we're still going through that process of healing ourselves as well. So that's important too, self-healing.
Right. And any last words that you want the audience to know? Anything that you want to leave them with?
Yes, today is September 30th. It's called Orange Shirt Day. And as you can see, I have my orange shirt and my jewelry on today. And what this represents is the survivors of American Indian boarding schools, and just a memorial of those that did not come home. And that's what this day is for. And it was an activist, a survivor, that created this day. And her name is Phyllis Whipstad. And she has a book out, and she kind of talks about the history of it. And her story is, when she was sent to boarding school, they took her orange shirt, her orange dress, which was gifted to her by her grandmother. And so that's why we wear the orange shirts, is to represent that. Orange
Thank
Shirt
you.
Day.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And just in general, like if somebody wants to learn more about the culture, what's like a good place for them to learn a little bit more?
Depends on which culture you want to learn.
Oh,
Usually for the tribes, they usually do have a website that you can go to. You can just Google them and see which tribe it is that you're wanting to research.
okay.
But for us, we just try to stay along the lines of the tribes of Oklahoma. And like I said, there's 39 of them here. But we're always including everybody else too. So come join us.
Awesome. And then we'll also leave the link below. I'll get that later. So if you guys want to join and learn more, you can go to the website and learn how to join. And then also for everybody's work, I definitely recommend that you request a viewing. I'll put that there as well. And again, it was such a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for your time and sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. And again,
Thank you, Farah.
thank you for coming to the Nursing Dose with Farah. Until next time, and please subscribe on Spotify.